Hello. Let's start. So there's no screen, so I'm holding my baby on my knee. My name's Rees, and hopefully I'm going to talk for about half an hour. And this talk's about listening, it's about music, it's about musical sound, and it's about sound in general, because there are a lot of sounds around us. Some of them we call music, some of them we don't think about like music. It's about noise, and it's about this thing called soma. Does anyone know what that is? Soma or somatic? Does anyone know? Can you? Okay, so it's about body, mind inside body, or bodily thinking with your body. It's about a bigger thing than just this idea of a brain. Please come and sit down. You can still leave if you want. You're not trapped. I won't be offended if you sit down and then stand up and run away. Just don't scream. Okay? And then maybe we'll get onto this thing of silence. So I'm trying to divide it into three sections. First one's going to talk about Western music and what we think about as music. The second one's going to talk about noises and how people in different cultures, and now also in Western culture, like our culture, think about noises. And the third one is going to start talking about using music to work on your body, on your consciousness. So normally we might play music just as a performance, but sometimes you might turn music the other way around and play music like meditation. And then hopefully it'll be 30 minutes. So let's get started. So the first, it's really small. So let's see. So let's start talking about Western musical sound. So does anyone want to volunteer? I know it's in English and...
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good. So I just need you to volunteer an answer.
Oh, no, okay, I thought you were going to do a trick or something.
No, I haven't thought of any tricks. Can anyone tell me some things that we need to make music? What are some of the elements of music?
Emotion.
Emotion, yeah. Rhythm. Rhythm's a big one.
Melody.
We need a melody. So let's go with rhythm and melody. So Western music is based on... We could reduce Western music to one or two main things. It's made of notes, and notes go in rhythms. Sometimes they make melodies. But what are notes made of? Does anyone want to say what a note is?
Sound?
It's a sound and it's a frequency. If we listen to a note coming from over there, like dum 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 dum,
Vibration?
it's a vibration that comes to us through the air. And what is it doing on a more basic level, like the most basic thing, something that's so basic it might even be invisible, it's so right in front of us. Okay, so we could say it starts and stops, and it can go higher or lower, and it can get louder or it can get softer. So music can be made of these types of things. So we can have a high note, we can have a low note, we can have a long note, we can have a short note, and then we can have something, a note with a pitch, like a note, or we can have a noise. Like listen in this music we can hear noises. The drums, that's quite noisy, but there are also a lot of musical notes that make a harmony. Yeah. So we're getting some ideas together to describe the most basic blocks of musical sound, all sound really. If we listen carefully, we might even hear some other sounds from the forest. A bird, or his feet, and they have the same, they're exactly the same as the musical sounds, but at the moment we're not thinking about them in the same way. By the end of the talk, hopefully we might start to change our mind, because at the end of the 20th century, now it's the 21st century, we can make music out of anything, and anything can be music. So it could be the case. You might not decide personally that's your idea. Okay, so let's go back to Western music and maybe this. So generally Western music, the emphasis in Western classical music is on musical sounds and combining them together to make harmonies. So just wave at me or look really, really confused so that I know that I need to explain something, or ask a question if I'm talking about words that you don't know, or vocabulary. So I'm just going to assume everyone's cool, unless you're not cool. Have you seen Team America? Team America? You know where he's going in? It's puppets? Oh, you have to see Team America. It's really good. So he has to go into this bar and be a secret agent, and they say, if something goes wrong, make the sign. Do you remember what the sign is? And this is the sign. So just do that. Okay, so anyway, let's keep going. So the other thing that is really important generally in Western music is that we don't want any noisy stuff to get in the way of when we listen to music. When we listen to music, we want to hear the music. We don't want to hear an airplane. We don't want to hear a truck going by. We don't want someone to start talking about what they ate for breakfast next to us. We want them to shut up. We want to hear the music, just the music. We don't, traditionally, people didn't really want to listen to noise and in the music. So you would listen, I'm talking about classical music, but it also counts for lots of different styles of music. I mean, this music's generally so loud that when you're near it, you're really hearing it. But even if you go to hear some blues gig or something like that, if someone starts to get really, really noisy, or if something is really loud, it's generally a problem. We want to hear the music. We don't like noise. We want to hear these musical sounds. So let's have a listen. So I just said a few things. We decided, well, I said music was sounds, noises, pitches. They could be long or short, they could be high or low, they could be loud or soft, or they can change. So let's just hear some examples of older music that is like this. So the first one's by Tallis. It's from the Renaissance. He's an English composer, so it's the 16th century. Tallis was working for Anne Boleyn, who is Henry VIII's wife, the first one that got her head cut off. She sponsored him. This is called Spem and alium. So we have to end it kind of suddenly. So you might notice about that it's very pure, we could say pure sound. The recording gives you really clear recording, representation of the voices. So the aim is that you're really just hearing the pure musical sound, and the structure of it is musical sound in combination with other musical sound, and it makes a very strong order. And so this orderliness, there's nothing quite random or wild in there. So the philosophy behind this is that it represents order and structure and beauty coming from these things. So it's more this Renaissance idea. So all art, if you think about it, it represents a view about the world, how the world should be or how the world could be. This is someone talking to us. The composer and the performer, they're talking to us, but they're not writing words, they're singing. And we understand some things from this communication. So this communication is about orderliness, purity of sounds, relationships of sounds. So this is the ideal 500 years ago of music. So it changes a little bit if you include instruments, so maybe we can listen to this piece by Bach. I'll just go into it a bit. It's a few hundred years apart, but a similar idea of musical sounds, complex combinations, structure repeating itself. Da, 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 da. We understand that's the melody, and then we get interested because he makes some combinations. But there's no noise of a horse, there's no noise of people fighting with swords or shooting guns because that was not music. So the society then was interested in this idea of music. So let's keep going a bit. Can't remember what's next. So now let's imagine we go in a time machine through time and we reach the year 1900 or the late 18th century. So we have a world now which has been through the Industrial Revolution. This is a world full of machinery. It's had automobiles, like cars are starting to be invented. People work in factories. You have a lot of smoke. You have a lot of banging and mechanical sounds. There were no mechanical sounds really when these other pieces of music were made. So you have a horse pulling a carriage, it makes a sound that is repeating itself, but it's not a machine. And so the idea and the consciousness of people starts to change. In the West, I'm talking about Western ideas. Oops, wrong way. Wrong way. Come on. Okay. So here are two guys. They are futurists. This is 1913 in Italy. And these guys made these instruments called noisemakers. I can't remember the name in Italian. I can remember the vaguely how it's spelt, but I don't want to guess. So they created these special instruments because their idea was that these old-fashioned instruments like violins, organs, singing beautiful melodies like we heard, I mean that's all a joke now. That's not our world. If we want to make art about our world, we live in a noisy world. If you go to the middle of the city, what do you hear? Cars. All the time you hear traffic. Traffic is noisy. And traffic can be stressful. I think I heard about some studies of stress levels, and people who live next to busy roads have more stress than people that live away from roads. But it's always, almost always, in our world we hear traffic. That's our sounds. Bach and these other guys didn't have that. They had horses and, I don't know, shouting. Okay, so these guys made this. There aren't any recordings of what they made with this. People tried to rebuild it, but he wrote some stuff. I'll try and read it to you. He says, "Nowadays, music should aim to be the strangest and most dissonant combinations of sound possible." So none of this nice singing and beautiful stuff, because that's not the sound we hear outside. We were approaching noise sound. This revolution of music should be paralleling the increase of machinery in human labor, in the pounding atmosphere of great cities, and as well as in the formerly silent countryside. So even in the countryside you have the sound of machines and industry. So this fantasy about pure musical sound, like Thomas Tallis, is a joke if you are trying to make art about your world. So at the same time, reflecting these ideas, Western music starts to become noisier. So people start to use percussion instruments more. We talked about this sound over here. So we hear the drums, that's a noise sound, and we hear harmony and bass and chords. If you want to get more into noise, they had, this is before computers, you can hit a drum. Or you can bring into a concert things which people never used before. So this is a famous piece called Ionization by a French composer, and he used an air raid siren and a lot of percussion to start to open up what sounds were okay in the concert. Previously these sounds were not okay, they were horrible. Horrible, noisy, ugly, disgusting sounds. And maybe they still are. But yeah, let's see. So you hear there's not much harmony, not much chords or musical notes. Okay, so that's about the 1920s. People were very emotional and passionate about this. So often in these concerts people had riots and fights, smashing each other with chairs, and all sorts of crazy stuff happened because it was very strong ideas. Still a strong idea. So here's another quote from the 1930s from a guy called John Cage. Does anyone know about John Cage? He's a composer. He died in 1992. He's born in 1912, I think. And he said at this time, in the past, disagreement was between dissonance and consonance. So musical sounds, which sound beautiful together or not beautiful together. Dissonance is, but it's still using musical notes. And he says, in the future, this disagreement will be between noise and so-called musical sounds. So he understands in 1930 that we will soon be at a point where music includes noise, all sorts of noise. I guess we would only have to go to that stage, the chill out stage, for half an hour and we would hear loads of samples of noises that 200 years ago people would never think to put in music. But now we have computers, phones, we can easily put any sound and we can make all sorts of things. So our consciousness is opened up somehow by our situation. So let's keep going. So that's Western, that's a short journey through 1,000 years of Western stuff. My personal connection with this was because I was a saxophone player, a professional saxophone player, and I got kind of bored with, felt the same as this futurists. Somehow I was walking down the street in Sydney and all the stuff I spent my time learning how to play wasn't my world. It was some fantasy world that was interesting for other reasons. So I went to live in Japan and I was interested in an instrument called shakuhachi. So we'll just do a little bit on Japanese music because Japanese people don't have the same history. So this is a painting from the 18th century and this painting is called Listening to Insects. So these people here are having a party and listening to grasshoppers. And Japanese people for a very long time always love listening to insects. So one of the explanations is that apart from being very musical, grasshoppers are really, they have all of, we talked about music, it can be long or short, the sound, high or low, noisy or noise or pitch, loud or soft. If you listen to some grasshoppers tonight, there are lots of them near the chai shop and the main stage, loads. You can even listen to the main stage and sit near that cube and then you can listen to grasshoppers and the main stage together. So one of the reasons that people enjoyed them in Japan is because insects tell us about the seasons. So summer, you have in Lithuania you don't have cicadas. You know cicadas, really noisy ones. But in Japan, as soon as you hear that, you know it's summer. Or if you hear other ones, you know what time. You know it's a season, so you can enjoy the fact that it's autumn because you can hear this type of insect. So a lot of the time there are people, there are artworks or writings or drawings or whatever with people listening to insects. It's an interesting idea for a party, go for a picnic, listen to insects. So here's another one. This is from a book that's written in the 10th century, so 900. It's the earliest novel in the world. And she's talking about a concert that happened and an unbelievably beautiful moment occurred because they were performing a dance outside and then a strong wind came through the trees. And so you had the musicians and the dancers and then the sound of this wind. And it was like magic because it's something that you could never expect and that will never happen again. So it's an amazing moment. So they don't think, these people did not think that this was a shitty thing. Oh my god, I can't hear the music, this wind is happening, or this fucking grasshoppers, shut up. They found the combination unbelievable. So they have a different aesthetic. So I can show you a little bit of the dancing because Japan, for very many hundreds of years, they closed off their country and so many of the arts are unchanged. So the dancing that they were doing is extremely similar, if not the same as this. so unfortunately you can't see so well. You might also notice that the sound of the instruments is a lot noisier. Can you see, kind of? So all of this came from China, 6th, 7th, 8th century. It was used in the court. Musicians sit at the back. So if you can imagine this, and then maybe the sound of wind in the trees. Going, although it would be nice to listen to that more. So this is another example. This is from a lot later. This is called Hake. This is a biwa, this instrument. It's a bit like an English lute, like a really old guitar. And there's another famous book from the same time as this other idea about the flute, the concert and the wind. And she's singing the story of this family, tragic story of this family. Two big families in Japan, each one's fighting the other one to control the country, and they fight to the death. So that book's called Heike Monogatari. So this is Heike Biwa. So I just want to show you this because we want to open up the quality of the instruments. So when I played saxophone, or when you hear a piano or a violin, generally the idea is that you create quite a pure sound. And you might have heard from that flute before that it is a lot of breath sound. And the same type of aesthetic, the same type of taste, you can hear it when she hits the strings and how she sings. So just a short bit of this. Different taste. So I went there to Japan to study this particular flute. It was used by Zen priests for several hundred years as a meditation instrument. I didn't really know what that meant. Well, I liked the music a lot. That was enough for me. So far we talked about this idea of West. We talked about what sound can be and how music might be. Its sound, long or short, it can be high or low, it can get louder or softer. And we reached this point where I want to start talking about this idea of soma. So when we start to talk about, normally so far we've been talking about music, and I pick up my flute, or she picks up her biwa, and she plays you a piece of music, and her body helps give you this music, and that's enough. So I'm just playing a piece of music. We want to try and, now I want to start to turn that upside down and look at how making music can change how you think, or you can use the act of playing music or listening to change your consciousness like a meditation. And that's hopefully the next few minutes and then we'll finish. So this is the shakuhachi, this is what I went to study. Again, it's a very ancient instrument from China. It's made of bamboo. It's very beautiful looking. And that's me. Should have taken that out. Okay, so this is a guy called Watazumi, and he is one of the more recent famous guys for playing shakuhachi in a more spiritual way. So let's just have a listen to the way he plays it first. So he talks about playing music. You notice that that's also quite noisy. So it has noise, but also a lot of these other things we talked about, musical sounds with a pitch, all sorts of things. But he talks about this in a really special way. He talks about it that the reason we use sound is to get to the basis of life and human health and strength. And then he says, express in sound your whole life force. So these are kind of mysterious things. But then he also says something a bit more concrete. He says, focus on lengthening your out breath, so blowing out, rather than worrying about breathing in. So flute's very good for that. You have to blow out for a long, long time and breathe in and blow out again. So he wants to use playing this flute to get a human being to practice moving away from unconscious breathing, so just breathing without thinking about it, to breathing in a focused way in order to concentrate your mind in a specific way. So he calls it, don't just have the simple movement of your lungs, and move towards a conscious or mindful breathing. So the reason he's playing this instrument is as meditation. So it's a physical practice, like yoga or something. He also did a lot of stretching and all sorts of stuff. So now we're moving into music, but playing the sound, and almost the sound that you make is not the most important thing. It's a way, or it's a method for getting you to do a physical, mental and physical somatic practice. So almost we're kind of finished with music now. But we need it to do it. Anyway, we can never be finished with it. That's too long. That's John Cage again. So you might know about John, but now I wanted to, this is too long to do now, but what I'm trying to do to finish is, we went all the way through Western music to noise. We thought back a bit in time and we listened to Japanese people's idea of noise and music and how it's a bit more joined up historically. And now we're going to jump back to our current time in the West and how music can combine noise and every sort of sound. And John Cage, well, this is probably important to read a little bit. John Cage made this quote, and he said, musicians don't generally hear single sounds. They listen to relationships between two or more sounds. So hear one sound and how is it in a combination with another sound. So music for them doesn't have anything to do with audition or this act of listening. Again, just look really confused if it's, and I'll explain more. Anyway, so music doesn't have anything to do with audition, the act of listening. Music has to do with observing a relationship. So I enjoy the complex relationship between this sound and this sound. And if we jump back in time to our Tallis, the easiest way is to just play it. Tallis. Where is it? This is where we started. It's the relationships between two or more musical sounds that we are enjoying. Okay, so he's saying that musicians focus almost all the time on that relationship rather than just listening to individual sounds and really hearing them deeply. So you might agree or disagree. That's okay, because there's really no black or white answer. That's the good thing about arts, there's no answer. Okay, no final answer. So he says that in order for the musicians to focus on these combinations of music sounds, they have to ignore so many sounds. He says they have to ignore crying babies, fire engines, telephone bells, coughs that happen in the middle of their concerts. And he says actually if you meet people who are really interested in hearing sounds, they often are interested in the quiet sounds. Did you hear that? They will say. So for him, he got to this point where all sounds could be musical sounds if they were organized. So what you need to do as a composer is organize all the sounds that are available, which is every sound these days. And once they're organized, it's music. We need more time to talk about that though. He wrote this very famous piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence for a piano, where you don't play the piano, you open and close the lid. And the sound, the music, is all the sound that happens in the room. I don't know if you've heard of that piece? Yeah, from the 60s. Yeah. So this is the performance of that. But we don't have time to get into that. So now we reach this point where Western music is starting to incorporate all types of noises, all types of conventional and not conventional musical sounds. So I thought we could end with 3 examples. First one's Kraftwerk. So listen to the musical bits and the noisy bits, or it's all musical. But we think of this as kind of normal now. We don't hear it this way. We're hearing this is quite normal now in our time. And Atari Teenage Riot, who knows Atari Teenage Riot? A bit noisier.
Feelings of hollowness.
That's pretty noisy. And maybe some basic channel. Not techno, like noise is such a fundamental part of that. Compressed noise is a totally important part of this whole genre of music. I'll go fast forward so you know what it's going to be like. Or something like that. So we've gone all the way from the choir thing that we heard through an opening up in Western minds to all sounds and noisy sounds, to the point where we don't notice that they're so noisy most of the time. And a little bit we tried to talk about this idea of playing or doing music as a meditation, but not so much on that. And that's probably enough. So that's the end. Thank you.